Test 1 2. 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 And final test 1 2.
is a minute slow, so we will go ahead and get started. I'll call our meeting to order. Ms. Branham, did we notify the media?
We did.
Thank you. And I do declare that we have a quorum with 5 of 7 board members present today. We will need approval for our agenda to move forward.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda to move forward.
I second.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda's approved. Dr. Penn, do you want
Sure.
to take over?
Thank you so much for coming in early for this facilities work study. An update, we do have Ben Thompson with us to share information for the facility study that we've kind of started a couple of years ago and kind of the options that we have. So just trying to bring everybody back up to date so that we can start looking at options and having the board to kind of make a decision as we get into the new year. So also I would like to welcome and thank Ben for being here, and I'll turn it over to him. And then Dr. Harris and I will kind of jump in different sections of the presentation. You need to speak in the microphone so online can grab you. So.
I was about to say, you can move that to wherever you like, yeah.
Now we can see better.
There you go, perfect.
Perfect. Is this a new study, or is this a study that was done a couple of years ago?
This was a study that we started a couple of years ago, and then this is just kind of bringing everybody up to date, and some of the parts have been updated since.
Okay.
Yeah.
But are there some that is older, that is not updated?
He'll kind of talk through
Okay.
the ones that are old and the ones that we have new data for.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think, well, good afternoon. Ben Thompson again with McMillan Patterson Smith. It's great to be with you. Great to meet those that are new to this process overall. So that is one thing that we're going to be doing is, assessing kind of where we were versus where we are with new data. Really, that's the whole point, is to kick that side of it off and make sure that what we had previously is aligned with the results that have happened over the last year and a half, really, to make sure everything is still valid and moving forward in the right direction for you guys. So this afternoon, really, the objective is to, as Jody mentioned, is just to kind of fulfill or fill you in on what we've done thus far, and look at how the process has gotten us to where we are right now, and the progress that the school district has made in improving schools along those lines as well. About 2 years ago, we started out with the simple question is, how do we keep schools up to date? That's your baseline for any kind of facility assessment, is really understanding what you have, what needs to be improved in what you have, and is it operating in a condition that is acceptable to facilities, acceptable to operations, acceptable to the students and the teachers that are inside the facility. We did look at every single facility at that time. We went room by room, every single school, and found a number of what we would call deficiencies first. We tried to assign an understanding of why those deficiencies were the way they were, so that they could be corrected along a plan and along a timeline in the future. What we did originally as part of this baseline was to do a maintenance plan to make sure all of the facilities had both first a short-term plan of improvement before we talked about the long-term plan of improvement overall. When we look at a facility, we had a team of engineers and consultants and architects go out into the field, just so you're aware, and then we documented and categorized everything that we saw out there in the field. And that's important so that later on the maintenance staff, the facility staff could come back and do their own improvements, and we would capture that baseline from a cost standpoint overall. We also located all of those with the technology, with the software that we have for easy use into the future. On the screen, you'll see kind of a matrix of the overall ratings. Those ratings are 1 through 5. One being needs to be taken care of now or in the next year or two, all the way up to 5, which is just brand new, operating as in a new condition. The reason we rate those 1 to 5 is to prioritize them inside of a longer term plan. So if you have a roof that appears to be in good condition, let's say it's a 3, meaning fair, or like new, which is a 4, or good, which is a 4, then that you might need to replace that roof, but it's not going to be for another 5, 6, 7 years. So you need to know that from a timing standpoint. So that's why we rate these in this way. And we rate everything that we see, of course, in the field, but what we do is then aggregate and then sum all those up into 5 main categories. And then you see those categories at the top of the screen, which is site, those items that we found that was related to outside of the building. BE, which stands for building envelope, that's everything that keeps water and weather outside of the building. So think of roofs, windows, doors to the outside, brick, all the parts that keep the weather out. What's abbreviated is interior there in the center, the interior environment of the facility. MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and HSS finally at the end, which is health, safety, and security. That's your code related items overall. So we rated everything that we found in the field individually, and then summed those up in those 5 categories to give you an idea or a picture of where the highest priorities might be overall. So you can see each one of the facilities is fairly unique in how those get rated. That's to point facilities and maintenance in the path of where should we focus our efforts over the next couple of years versus where we should focus our efforts over the next several years overall. You can see on the in each one of these, this is the summation of probably 10,000 individual items that we saw in the field when visiting each one of your schools. This is just a representation of that to understand where those areas are focused overall in your facilities. So this is baseline, and this is an important first step. You know, making sure that we understand what the existing condition of each one of your schools are from a maintenance and operations standpoint, to really form how we might view the long-term plan of this facility as well. Even past when this was initially visited, or when we initially visited the site and started compiling all this information, Mr. Harris and the maintenance department have taken this on and started to improve on their own overall. So this is not just a report, this is actually a document that informs what you do on a yearly basis, both when we finished it and into this year and the next. Mr. Harris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, whether you want to say anything about what you've done with the results of the study thus far, and we can move on.
Well, it's just pretty much what Ben said, is we've tried to prioritize the 1s and the 2s in this plan and make sure that we're working on those. We looked at the whole list. I created a list and went through with our maintenance and our former maintenance director what we thought we could do in-house, and they were working on those jobs, and they're pretty much just picking those off as they go through maintenance requests and things that come through, but trying to do as much as we can there, and then trying to prioritize the bigger jobs that are on there that we'll have to have outside people come in to do. And I have, as you ask questions or a little later in Ben's presentation, I can talk about some of the things that we have budgeted this year that came right off of this plan. So I'll be glad to answer any questions about that.
Is it fair to assess that some of the things that we've done here in the last year aren't reflected in this matrix that's up, like the roof at the high school and what we've added at Sanders?
Sure,
Yeah.
yes.
The roof, yes. The addition, no, because it wasn't existing, right? So it's just the existing conditions that we.
Well,
were
on the high school, we actually did some maintenance on the roof.
for sure.
So I would think here that.
So that building envelope 2 for Lawrence High School would probably be a little bit better now that the that the
Okay.
roof has been.
Just trying to make sure I understand
Sure.
what these numbers reflect with what we have today and where we're going.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How much progress has been made on the 1 and 2s that you've been able to address?
I think we've made some significant progress on it. I think our maintenance department right now, I think we're improved there. We're hoping to budget another person for next year to get us back to where we were earlier. But they're working hard through a lot of things. But just trying to keep these buildings open and going and the systems running takes up a tremendous amount of their time, and then we try to pick these things off as we can. But there's been some progress made. I have a list back in my office that I can pull and pull some things off of there and share that with you. I did not bring that to this meeting, but I can grab it maybe just in a little while.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, the whole idea is that we capture as much as we can when we did the assessment, and then, you know, you start chipping away at this overall over time based on the priority that's set there. I know we're just seeing 2 graphics on there, and that's kind of the summation of everything. There are a ton of reports, a ton of just data in the background that the school district is using to really drive the capital maintenance side of the equation.
Because each school got about 50, 60 pages of like each individual. I mean, was it wiring? Was it bathrooms? Was it this level bathroom? Was it that? You know, so everything was rated throughout as in what was needed and what needed to be addressed, and was ranked from the 1 to 5. So those.
Then y'all came up with these numbers based on the average.
And then they came up with the average of,
Okay.
for the entire, you know, kind of group. So the building envelope consisted all the different outside components. And so we got a rating on roofing, we got a rating on walls, we got a rating on drainage, we got a rating on all that kind of stuff. So all that's what made those averages of 2s or 3s.
So my next question would, I'm interested, Mr. Thomas, that since you do this across South Carolina, because I guess in some ways I didn't find these numbers, you know, terrible.
Mhm.
Are we okay? Or, are we in dire straits here where we need to take some major action, or compared to other school districts like Lawrence District 55, are we in a pretty good spot?
You're in fair condition. I
Okay.
would put it that way. It's not to say that a 2, let's say you had building envelope, meaning roofs and walls on the outside of the building. Let's say you rated that at a 2. That might actually contain some significant items that really need to be addressed over the next 0 to 2 years that have a higher cost. So really all we're doing right here is really focusing on direction. But then also within that, remember that those numbers are just a mathematical average.
Understand.
And so that's an important factor, because then we take it another step forward and look at cost. And that's really what Red is mentioning, is that really helps you guys determine, all right, well, where's the serious issues that we need to deal with right now to make sure that, you know, we cover those, even while a category might be rated this or that. What are the actual items in there? And Dr. Penland was mentioning, you know, we geolocate those in the software so that you can go back to them, see them. There's documentation of the facts in the field as we see them.
Right.
So we did take a look at cost, and this really goes to the point. It looks like we have a little bit of graphical errors going from computer to computer, but in this one we took the cost of, let's say that it's a subcontractor that has to perform everything on these facilities. So across the board, instead of the district can provide their own forces, or it can be part of a larger project, we with the baseline, we thought about just what if we had to go through and make sure that we capture and improve every single thing that we found. And then how does that relate to, in terms of percentage, where is the most need? So that really helps direct you to where the issues are. It also, I think, helps facilities and maintenance determine what they can spend or what they can target spending on a fiscal year. So their budgets are really aligned to every fiscal year on a specific series or sector of items located in this plan.
I don't understand the number value here. what does this represent? What we're spending today?
This would be the cost to fix everything from a
Okay.
deferred maintenance from the kind of the prior plan to bring everything up to level without any additions, without meeting any other type of needs. It would just be bringing stuff up to
Fives, yeah, items 1 through 4 up to a 5, no matter what they were. And assuming that it's all subcontracted work, which tends to be a little bit more expensive in that way, instead of district's forces, meaning the maintenance department. So we looked at it not only by school, we looked at it by category too. We looked at it by elementary, middle, and high. Of course, what we found was, and this is likely not going to surprise anybody in the room, is that the high school has the most need. It's probably a little older than the average schools that you have here in the district, but it's also your largest building. So most of your needs are going to be found at your largest footprint within the district overall. We did look at it from a category standpoint. This actually helps understand if you're looking at the baseline maintenance costs. It also helps you kind of understand what you're looking at long term. When you see mechanical, electrical, plumbing items, and that's the vast majority of where your cost may be associated, you really have to consider the age of the building, how it would respond to code as you were improving that through time as well. So that's a real helpful planning tool on at least our side of the ledger. Jody, I don't know if you want to add anything here. These costs are meant to be, like I said, subcontractor costs. You do have other costs that are incurred when you do anything from escalation all the way through subcontractors, procurement costs and permitting costs rather, and others. So the whole idea is not that this is what it actually costs, but this gives you a direction in which you can go fiscal year by fiscal year and prioritize the improvements from a maintenance plan standpoint. Anything you want to add here?
I think I'm good there.
So one thing I would point out to you, I think you have a copy of this
Oh, yes.
in your packet as well. The study that we did for you guys a year and a half ago and continue to update as we go along from a maintenance standpoint. This report is separate than that. This is kind of, think about this as a state mandated or a state required reporting where they look at and summarize the things that they see. They do this every 5 years to make sure that they look at all, the State Department does this every 5 years to make sure they look at all facilities. It doesn't duplicate the things that we found. Our reporting, our information that we share with you guys is a lot more detailed because it goes into maintenance and it makes a.
So
it makes
if you
the
look at
plans.
this report, and this was one that we also requested too, because we may be eligible for some additional state funding that addresses actually fixing kind of the poorer districts' facility needs. And so this is one of the things that they pull out. So whenever you hear a lot of areas across the state that this county or this district got $20–30 million to build a new elementary school, that's the pot of money that this facility needs assessment addresses. So once you get into like page 6 and 7, that's the 2-page kind of summary for E.B. Morris. And so you can kind of see how they kind of went through and kind of summarize some of the issues that they were seeing with HVAC, plumbing, building envelope, structural, some of the same things that Ben's already talked about that they addressed. And then they can show some different pictures there. So they looked at bathrooms, the gyms, and the art centers. And you can kind of see how that varies from school to school, some of the pictures and different things that they picked out, noticing some of the renovations that would be needed and what it would take to kind of bring or what the needs are at each individual site. Then once you get back toward the back, you can kind of see how they rated everything. Once you get back to page 24, the building systems based on each one of those schools and how they felt each one scored fair, poor fair, or even some areas that were good. And you We've got several pages of those based on 3 schools per page.
So this particular report was done by the State Department.
It was, yes, commissioned by the State Department and completed by MBCon.
Okay.
They also have some enrollment information in there that was pulled, and then they have some concepts and kind of recommendations toward the back, starting on page 34, of focusing if we qualified for additional funds, kind of where their priority would focus those funds back into kind of the replacing or the consolidating of different levels of buildings. So this one was just completed. I think we just received this report about a month ago, but they were on site with us about 3 months ago.
And having flipped through it, there are no surprises because we captured way more detail with this when we went through it originally. It's interesting what both studies found is the prioritization of schools, if you're thinking about long-term, is the same. So we'll get there in just a moment, but our long-term findings were high schools first, middle schools, and then elementary schools, just based on the information that we were able to obtain in the field. Those are kind of your big priorities overall, and they found the same thing because the condition is essentially the same over the last year.
Jody, have we put this on our website yet?
We just received it from the state. Well, I don't think that one is on their website yet.
This would be valuable to have it, so
Yes.
people can, and as I'm
I know.
talking to individuals about our conditions, I can point them to this. And
Right.
This,
Okay.
again, it's an outside source that's come in and said, hey, look, we want to see what your facilities look like.
And this very, very much backs up everything that Ben and his group found also. And just kind of gives us some ideas of, where to focus, but also the needs that we have, that it's just not us saying we won't. It shows that we need.
Every school needs some more.
Right. Yeah.
So, any further questions about facility assessment or process there? We'll talk about the other components of it, of course, but before moving on, any other questions, comments? Great. We also took a look at enrollment and growth trends over the course of the last 7 to 10 years, and then used a third-party demographer to assess, project, forecast really what would likely happen in the next 5 and 10 years by school over the next 5 or 10 years, so that we can begin to say, all right, and make a distinction between where growth may be occurring, where growth may not be occurring, and then how your buildings might need to respond to that growth overall. So just starting overall, you'll see some of these reflected in just overall demographics. Is that population overall has rebounded here in Lawrence County, and within the bounds of Lawrence 55 is the year 2000, you're virtually back up to the population that you were there, and I'll show you a graph in just a moment. But there was a dip over the last 20 years of population that's since recovered in that way. If you'll overall in Lawrence County, you have seen a rate of growth, a small rate of growth overall in comparison to both South Carolina and the U.S. And that seems to continue. And what I would point out here is really what we're looking at when you're talking about population are parents and then student-aged cohorts that are anticipating being affected inside of your schools overall. That's what the demographer is looking at. What the demographer found in his report about a year and a half ago, again, is that your population has, when you turn that population into enrollment, it's really stabilized across the board. You don't expect any big shifts up or down over the next 5 years, or he doesn't expect any major shifts up or down over the next 5 years if you're looking at the school district in total. You will see some shifts by growth or by changes in your demographics per area back and forth, plus or minus, but in aggregate, overall for the district, it's fairly stable. Maybe slightly decreasing, but fairly stable over the next 5 to 10 years overall. In fact, when we took this at the end of 2021 all the way to 2020 or 2033, virtually the same amount of students when you sum it all up. We were talking about and thinking about or looking at 45-day numbers today, and it seems to be on track with exactly how the demographer forecasted this overall. What we'll be doing in January is taking those school by school and showing you a depiction of the forecast, where it was targeted in the original forecast, and how close it was in that way. And the reason that we do that is to make sure that the data that we were using is translated into what the results you're seeing. And then we'll adjust the forecast for the next 5 or 10 years overall. Nothing wildly different from what we saw in the forecast is the result right now. We'll be able to quantify that in January a little bit further.
Before we go on, I found it
Yeah.
really interesting. In 2015-16, we're almost at 6,000 students versus now where we're looking, the projection all the way up to 2031 is only 5,200. So I guess my question there in regards to our facilities we have now, can what we have right now continue to educate the students that we can anticipate? I was expecting to see some big growth here that was going to drive us to reconsider building additional schools. But if these numbers are right, and we were able to educate almost 6,000 students 11 years ago, is it safe to say that that's our buffer, that we need to get beyond 6,000 before we get real serious about finding money to build a new school?
I would say building a new school or doing anything to a new school is not just a growth thing. It has a lot of other factors. One of those is the condition of the building, for sure. At some
Fair.
point, it actually costs you the same, if not more, to renovate a building because of the codes in which it was built under. So that might be a separate factor to kind of consider. The other is for older structures specifically, you have a lot more requirements that you have to meet as a district, and that means anything from added guidance counselors, added services, added classroom features that you didn't have to have when the building was constructed to begin with. So, and I mention that because that's a factor when you had a classroom that now has to be used as 2 or 3 different other things other than a classroom. So that starts to help you kind of think about how you might improve a campus to either add or change in some way. So it's not the only factor. Growth is not the only factor. It is one of those main factors overall. I would also say we're looking at it in aggregate here. Some parts of the county are going up when you look at kind of from a population standpoint overall. In fact, I'd say most of the central elementary school attendance zones, as well as which you probably already know of, is Gray Court Owens. All of those areas are still showing some level of growth there overall. What I would then caveat that by saying is that it's a small amount of growth, and you have an increasing age of your general population overall. So while you might see growth, you might see new households, new housing being built, Remember, you still have a large housing stock that you're replacing those people that don't have children anymore into those homes. So all that leads into the mix into the demographer's forecast of how he looks at growth overall.
Ben, can we back up 1 second? On the prior slide where it's estimating the 5284, this number does not include any possibility of the new housing that is coming into the county. Is that correct?
It included some. It did not
Okay.
include the housing starts at the time that were active. It assumes what it knows every year, or
Okay.
it gathers the information that it knows every year. So there's a small amount of lag time between that information and the new information.
Okay.
But some of it is included in the forecast.
Okay.
In fact, in the forecast, and I think we got a copy of that to you. In fact, in the forecast, he tells you precisely what's included inside of his forecasting. And it's a conservative value for low growth.
And whenever we're looking at, and I think this is consistent with what you've said in the past when we met with our housing market people, whenever you have 100 new houses, you can pretty much bank on 80% of those being new to the area versus just relocating within the county. So it's not necessarily, it's be people buying to kind of upgrade inside Lawrence. It would be new people to the area. So, and then I think y'all gave us a 0.5 per household to kind of calculate how many kids would be in those houses.
That's right. The demographer, because I asked him that question specifically, his range is always 0.4 to 0.6. So if you split the difference, 0.5, assume every new housing start or series of new housing starts includes 0.5 students associated with it. And that's to be specific about it, because you'll hear sometimes, there's 2 kids to every household. Well, yeah, but also if you have a lot of houses, you don't necessarily have all families in those houses as well. So it's generally 0.5. And while that might be important, is that you actually need thousands of houses for it to really make an impact when it comes to enrollment and just growth on the growth side. But there are areas in which there are growth here in the attendance lines of District 55, so it's not all staying the same or slightly declining. There are some areas in which growth is happening. But like was just said, in this condition, growth is highly dependent on speculative development. So you might see some development going on around town. It's really by what scale and when are those phases coming online, because the developers expect folks to come in here as well from outside of Lawrence County to be in those houses. So overall, what I would say again is that the growth rate, remains fairly low, fairly consistent, and that's not a bad thing. Actually, stability is pretty good to plan with overall. So you have a pretty good time in which to kind of look at your facilities overall from a growth and change standpoint. I did pull, and then we'll be updating this even further.
This is the one that was also added into your packet today, so that's the green sheet.
And I won't go through all of the data points on this one, but this is the most recent population forecast that we pulled in anticipation of today and in anticipation of updating our enrollment charts for the school district. Excuse me. You can see, I'll focus on one specifically, upper right-hand corner. You can see that chart overall. That is the population, the total population of not Lawrence County, but Lawrence 55. And you can see, starting with, on the left-hand side of that chart, 2020, around that 39,000 population standpoint, and its big drop-off in first 2010 and its recovery into 2020, and its continued slow, slight, or low growth over time to kind of bring you to what is estimated overall today, which is just about, or estimated to be in the future, and that's to be back up to that 20 or that 2,000 level population overall. There's lots more behind this, and I've shared this with the district. While this is the boundaries of 55, we actually drill down further into each one of those zones again to see if there's any change from the last time that we assessed it. So that's the exercise in January to share with you guys overall to see if anything's changed really from what we reported last time, from not only a growth standpoint and in population, but from an enrollment standpoint in your schools. Anything there? Anything other than on population or demography? I'm going fast. There's obviously a lot of facts and figures behind all of these that I'm glad to share as we go along too. But one thing that was mentioned, and I think it is truly important, is it's not necessarily growth or change in population or enrollment that matters. It's really, can your schools handle change one way or the other? If you're slightly growing in some areas, as an example, and you're already overcrowded, that's just going to make it more overcrowded, right? So it's really understanding and assessing your existing schools and how they're being used to understand whether they're appropriate for what's going on in your enrollment right now. So we did just that. We took those values and took a look at the existing conditions of each one of the spaces, how they were being used. Went back and forth with principals to understand, how spaces that may have been classrooms at one time are now being used in different functions, and if that's the proper way to really forecast into the future. And what we found were some of the areas in which you might consider needs from a classroom only standpoint. Just as an example, the high school popped out on this one as being over capacity, meaning that there are additional classroom spaces that are needed at the high school. This isn't meant to tell anybody to add classrooms to the high school. They're actually operating right now with the number of students that they have. What this tells me is that they're just not operating the way that they had intended or may have been operating 5 years ago, because they have more students in the class. They may be floating teachers from classroom to classroom, for instance, or they may have slightly higher student-to-teacher ratios in some cases. So this is really just telling us you're getting close to a capacity that you really should consider either significant operational changes or some kind of intervention to those facilities to make that a standard kind of environment. So what we found just kind of in overall is, while growth is low, some elementary schools converting some of those spaces that have been used previously as classrooms will make a difference overall. The question would be then, how do you add the spaces necessary for the programs that you have out there right now?
And that kind of pulls into assuming your grade level distribution is exactly correct. So you have exactly the number of seats per grade at each one. So I think you mentioned in the past that 80% capacity is kind of the goal, anywhere between 80 and 85, so that you always have room for those grade levels to kind of function and kind of shift, and you have that flexibility in the building.
That's right. So this chart will again be updated and a lot with your new enrollment numbers actually, all the way up through this year, and we'll take a look at that in real terms in January. But I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what this is, because this is the important factor is in making decisions, is how you look at long-term planning is not just are you growing or changing, but can your buildings handle that growth or change kind of overall. Any questions?
Have we?
Yeah.
This is really for Dr. Harrison, Dr. Penland. Have we made any steps, the note on the side where it talks about elementary schools converting areas back into academic spaces? Have we made any steps in that capacity, or are we just focused on the 1 and 2s right now?
I know that some of the schools, I think it was Gray Court and Ford, had to reclaim some of those spaces because of the need for classroom space versus kind of the additional, so that some of our interventionists might be in in closets now, using very small spaces versus having, 2 interventionists in a full classroom, that type of thing. So we have had to reclaim some of our computer labs since you had more of a one-to-one. They didn't need an actual computer lab. Those have been reconverted into classrooms. So we have worked on some of those over the last year or so, or this summer. I think there was some that was reclaimed. But that has been a focus and a need in some of those areas.
Okay, thank you.
So, just final step here. What we did as at the end of this is kind of take all of those facts, which will again confirm and update, and then pose the question: well, how can we improve schools overall using that information, using the things that we want to see improve or add to the educational value of students overall in the district. We'll categorize those as we kind of go along. Obviously, academics is the primary thing that we're focused on in improvement, but there are other facilities in any campus that relate to athletics and arts and safety and security that need to be focused upon as well as we talk about academics overall. So there are a number of ways to solve the problem, right? There's no one and one only way to solve any problem when it comes to capital improvements planning or long-term planning overall. One thing that we do know is that right now it's just a pay-as-you-go kind of scenario. So you're looking at additions and renovations as you have capital available to you. You're looking at conversions as necessary year over year in each one of the schools kind of overall. And that's going to be your default model moving forward without thinking about kind of the longer term plan. So that's not bad. It just means that maintenance plan is pretty important over the next several years, right? And that's a good thing. That's why we focused on that at the very beginning, so you can continue to operate and improve schools as you think kind of about the future. The other options that we kind of thought about here, taking everything into account, is you could look at, since you have a pretty good enrollment balance or stability, and some more seats available, the younger in cohorts that you go, is you could look at consolidating some elementary schools. You could look at consolidating some middle schools, and then there are multiple ways to solve the high school problem or any concerns with the high school overall. When you're thinking about one idea of consolidating middle schools, for instance, is new construction, taking a couple of those and putting those together in a new construction, but on the same property that you own. That might be, for instance, in consolidating middle schools. But there are other ones in that scenario as well. For high schools, we really just said there's 4. We really thought through, are there other ways to do it other than the 4 that might be pretty easy to understand? I don't think so, but we might be wrong about that. So we wanted to talk through that with you guys. Is you could phase new high school construction on the property that you have. That's certainly an option. That's the approach of using what you have, the facilities on that campus that are useful in that way. Save some dollars by not constructing those again, and then just using those as part of a new plan, phased plan overall. So that was one way to think about it. Obviously, You could think about putting a new high school on an adjacent property too. You know, that's still a scenario, so long as there's property available, and that can be purchased as part of any kind of long-term capital plan. The reason that we thought about option B there is that you do have pretty significant athletics on your existing high school property now, and those are fairly expensive items. So if you're looking to really fine-tune on cost, one way to do that would be to eliminate, you know, having to build something brand new from scratch. So athletics as part of scenario B would be that option is, you know, not build those new, maybe refresh those, but just focus on the high school on a different piece of property. And then obviously probably the easiest thing to do would be to build a new school, new athletics on a new piece of property, right? That's probably the most expensive option as well within all of those scenarios, kind of overall. So there's still a lot of ways to move forward. It is not all about cost, just like it's not all about the age of the building. It's really kind of considering what the best and highest function of a long-term plan the district sees for the high school overall. So elementary, middle, and high schools, there's lots of options there. Then there's also one thing that we did want to kind of throw into the mix there was as we start that planning process is don't think just about the buildings, but think about how you structure those buildings as well. Grade alignment does matter. I believe that the district is doing some K-8s versus traditional elementary, middle, and high. It was previously doing a primary and intermediate model. You know, you could think about that. Maybe that alleviates some schools that have a little bit more population than they need or can have in their schools as they are. So all of those things are kind of mixed together to, you know, hopefully help you guys plan over the next several months what should be that long-term vision, long-term goal of the district overall. When we talked about that originally, I'll go through these quickly because these will be updated as we talk together over the next several months. But we wanted to make sure that we understood what we were thinking there is what kind of classroom additions, not new facilities, but what additions are necessary because of the growth or because of the need at each one of the facilities, but also what does a new elementary school cost, what does a new middle school cost, what does a new high school in those configurations cost overall. Stop and pause right there. All of that's January 2025 to really fine tune that and make sure that we're absolutely right on that. But what we wanted to do today was, you know, express this, bring this back up, restart on this effort. And with restarting comes any kind of like other ideas, other needs that you guys can think of, anything that we need to explore outside of what we've done thus far. I'll pause right there.
So going back a slide,
Yep.
just kind of bringing everybody up to speed was whenever we're looking at this one, I think whenever that research was done based on all of your site assessments, based on the projected enrollment and possible room for growth, that's how each one got a little bit of different items, like 4 classrooms at Lawrence Elementary versus a new kitchen at Lawrence Middle because they had just had their addition of 2 classrooms. So it's kind of based on the need of those sites, based on the site assessment and kind of the anticipated growth.
Absolutely. So this sheet specifically, assumes, and I'll point to maybe Lawrence Middle School and Sanders in that way. It's not just the classroom additions that are necessary. It's when you do some classrooms at some facilities, you're going to have to then also update code-wise and space-wise other parts of that facility, whether it be the media center or the cafeteria and the kitchen. So that's part of the thought process in some of the facilities. It's not just about classrooms, it has to be about, solving it overall.
And the anticipated growth in Gray Court, and kind of projected growth there, kind of shows the 10 new classrooms, supporting spaces, the new multipurpose room versus, kind of in town doesn't need that much, growth for spaces.
So I noticed back on one of the earlier pages, you have it listed as Lawrence Prep, but I know we don't own that building, do we?
Yes, we own that building.
We own Lawrence Prep?
Yes.
Okay, so why is this parentheses Pleasant View though?
That was actually, they reviewed,
So
They
is
looked
this
at
the
both
Prep
buildings.
Academy or the Pleasant View?
Sanders Center is the Prep Academy, and Pleasant View is Pleasant View,
It's Pleasant
actually.
View, okay,
Right.
that's what I mean, like
Yep.
Pleasant View.
Yep.
Okay, so Pleasant View, so I see that you reviewed it here, but then on this side, unless I don't see it, I don't see where there's anything in scenario one to do anything with Pleasant View. And is that just because we currently don't have any instruction there, like we don't have anybody there?
That's it, is we reviewed the buildings thinking that, if you had some program that you wanted to go into any of them, or you wanted to do something different than what you were doing with them now, that you would at least need to know the physical condition of them.
Okay.
That's not to say that we don't put that inside of a capital plan, but we haven't,
Well-
we haven't made any decisions.
The only reason I ask is because at one point, that was our K through third grade, and then 4 through 8 was at GCO. And if we need 10 new classrooms at GCO, is it best to build and add those classrooms somehow there? Or should we go back and utilize Pleasant View and get that building up to date? So,
That's right.
And my concern there would be the number of elementary classrooms that we would need versus based on space, and kind of seeing how that would work. But,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be something we'd have to look at to see grade construction, or configuration requirements for space there.
yeah. And if the building, I mean, I know the building's being used for some things now, but if it doesn't suit our needs anymore, I mean, that's fine. It was just a thought, because I noticed you had reviewed it initially.
Right.
So,
Yep.
okay.
So with that cost that you got on there for Pleasant View, is that what it would be to get it up to code, if that was an option to go back and use it?
Not up to code, but up to a good operating standard,
Okay.
yes. From a maintenance perspective only.
Okay.
But like I said, these are just kind of our beginning thoughts. This is not you guys. We want to hear from you guys as part of the process, informing the plan. There may be others, and you don't have to talk about them today, but just be thinking or being thoughtful about what else the district might need. Is it a career oriented classrooms or facility? Is it Montessori? Is that still a distributed? Is that a distributed model, or is that a central model? And then any kind of early childhood learning that might change, that you might see change over the course of the next several years. All of that's meant to be encapsulated in whatever your long-term vision and then long-term capital improvements plan is overall.
So I think the facility needs assessment that we have, and then your information, and from previous presentations that you've done, do lead to taking care of the high school first, then middle school, and elementary. And I know Mr. Carpenter and I have heard this presentation and seen this information many times now, but I know it's fresh for you guys. But I do think that we're probably at a point where when we come back and talk about this again, that we could put our ideas on the table as, okay, let's eliminate scenario 3. I can't even read that because I don't have my glasses on, but I'm just saying, as an example, let's eliminate that scenario and let's focus on this. Because we've had all of these options in front of us for a while, and, but now that we're circling back to it, I do think we need to do something to take the next step forward, so.
And some of the things that we've done, we've had some focus groups, we've met with some of our key stakeholders. We'll circle back around and start having those again once we need more feedback. Kind of going on into your slide deck too, you'll see some additional survey results there where we sent that out. This one had 526 respondents there. So you can see that it was one that was pushed out, and you got a lot of feedback for kind of who they were, kind of where they felt like we needed to kind of get some feedback. Do they feel like we should renovate? Do we feel like they have a good track record? Is the district growing? So kind of that perception of growth, even though we currently don't see it in numbers as in growth, we can see and feel the additional growth with housing developments. And we drive up the interstate and we know it's just minutes getting encroaching on top of us. So some of that is kind of what this kind of alludes to, and kind of that perception of not only the district but also where we should go and kind of what the others are seeing in the district. So that's there for you to peruse, and then as we start having additional kind of feedback sessions, we'll kind of invite you to those to see what the community is also saying.
And we did have several town halls when this started to get direct feedback from whoever decided to show up as well, so.
Yep. Yeah, 3. Was it 3 or 4? 3. Yeah.
So just a lot of information there, and the whole idea is just to bring your community along as you kind of go through the planning process together. So again, we're trying our best to make sure that we bring everybody up, but really what we'll be facing in January and beyond is what are the topics, where there are the improvements that you believe as a community member need to be prioritized or implemented, and are there any other things that need to change as you go along inside that plan, kind of overall. To get there, we tend to, and this is just a suggestion, the way that we tend to get to that side of it is take all this information, really keep it at the forefront as we go along, but then go through a series of just workshops together where we try to, like you said, either eliminate some things that aren't necessarily practical for the school district, or generate better ideas to really use what you have more efficiently or more effectively for what your needs are in the long term. Once we kind of get a better and more fine-tuned set of options, not just 15 scenarios, but get those down to a few that are really reasonable for you guys, then I think it's wise to always engage some of your either internal stakeholders here, meaning select teachers or staff or whomever, but then also like we did previously is look at focus groups on the external side as well. Any addition, and I know that you guys interact with any number of organizations and have interaction with intergovernmental officials here in either the county or the surrounding region. So using that as kind of an idea generator or a way to connect your needs to kind of the larger either Lawrence County or regional area is also important. But what we try to do is stagger that or stage that in such a way that everybody sees the plan develop as we go along in time. And at the end, you get a plan that has a value and a path forward in that way. Any questions?
Anything else?
You good? Thank you, Ben, so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
sure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And with no further business for our work session, unless anybody wants to just talk about this or throw out ideas, if you want, we've got a couple minutes, but it's up to you. If you want to take some time to marinate on it a little more.
And I think future conversation gonna have to be how we pay for all this.
It would be a referendum. Yeah. That's the only
And
one.
I agree with Chip. I do think that we need to get this on the website, for the public to be able to look at.
And Ms. Little, just let me mention, we had a meeting, Dr. Pennell and I, last week with the athletic director and the principal from the high school. Things that people don't see, that are big costs to our districts. For example, the football field right now needs some major work done to it. You don't notice that when you're there, but there's a big ticket item there that we really need to do. We have athletic facilities, but we don't have athletic facilities that are in great shape. Our team rooms down at the stadium are in bad shape. They need to be pretty much completely renovated. In the gym, we have a very nice looking gym. We have an auxiliary gym, but the locker rooms in that area need a complete renovation. I mean, they are outdated, and we have problems in there that we can't fix. We have drain problems in there that go so far underneath the building that we just can't fix them. So even though we have a baseball field and a soccer field and a softball field and football and all those things, tennis courts, we just talked about those. Tennis courts are about to need resurfacing, and people would look at that and say, well, they're pretty new. Well, they require maintenance. So even though we have these facilities out there, there's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to be sunk into athletics and into some places that people really don't even think about. They say we have those things, but they're not in the best shape that they need to be in, and for our kids to have. As we look around other counties around us, and what they're playing in and what they're playing on, it's a little bit different. And so we have work to do there as well. Just wanted to throw that out as something that came up last week with us in the high school.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harris. With that being said, were the athletic facilities included in the high school get up-to-date number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Gosh, I remember coming to a board meeting like 10 years ago, asking for lights on the tennis courts because we had courts, but once the time changed, we had to play at the
And I should have mentioned that lights.
Park.
Yeah, the lights that we're spending probably $15,000 a year just to get our lights back to working order on the football field. They need LED lights there. Pretty much every facility out there needs new lighting, and that's a big ticket.
Right, right. Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate you being here. And with no further business, I will adjourn our work session.
Thank you.